Nowadays, when we think of comics or graphic novels, it's usually Japan's manga or Korea's manhwa that comes to mind. But many other countries like Taiwan and India have a rich legacy of illustrated storytelling. So why haven't they taken the world by storm, and what does it take to become a global comic powerhouse? Well, to get a picture of the innovative tools and strategies that are transforming the comics landscape in Taiwan and India, I am joined by Philippe Tzou, Trade and Investment Commissioner for Belgium's Wallonia Export Investment Agency in Taiwan, and Debkumar Mitra, a mathematician turned artist and comics curator, joining us from Kurukshetra city in North India's Haryana state. He's currently a comics editor and graphic narrative instructor at the National Institute of Design in India. Thank you both so much for staying with us. Now, Philippe, I will start with you. Taiwan's comic scene has both been influenced and overshadowed, as we mentioned, by Japan's manga, Korea's manhwa, and several other influences, just like Taiwan has had. What are Taiwanese creators doing now to break away from that and forge their own identity or their own line of storytelling?
Well, I think Taiwanese have this openness to the world that is very unique, and the comics artists are reflecting that. So there's a blend of maybe some influence from Japanese manga, but also of American superheroes. And there's also very, very locally brewed, locally bred artists that have their own graphic style and their own way of narrating stories. I personally have worked with a Taiwanese artist called Sean Zhuang, and he actually draw a 10-page story in 2023 with a Belgian artist. I don't know if you can see clearly. So on the top is a Taiwanese artist, and then on the bottom is the Belgian artist. So they draw a 10-page story together, and it was published in 2023 in Belgium, and respecting the Taiwanese artist language, actually. So, in fact, what Taiwan is doing is very interesting because it's opening to the world, and it wants to export its comics, and the comics industry, such as particularly in Europe, but also we've seen it in the English-speaking world. We've seen it open towards those comics being published in English or in French or in Italian, like I said. Because, well, they're seeing something, well, foreign publishers in comics are seeing something that is alternative to the Japanese or the Korean comics, alternative to also to European comics. So it's a really a niche and a style of its own, and it's creating a little bit of it's creating its own rights to be known in the world of comics industry in today's So we're seeing it more and more in such as the Angoulême Festival in France, which is the biggest international comics festival where publishing rights are being sold. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is an exceptional moment, because we're also seeing those comics being translated into movies, animated films, and so on. And a lot of the Taiwanese government efforts, of course, are behind this.
And to your point about translations, Philippe, comic books often use slang and colloquial language while incorporating humor and references that may be unique to the author's culture. So direct and literal translations are often far from adequate to make the comics travel. Johannes Fiederling has translated several Taiwanese graphic novels into his native language, German, and he spoke to us about the challenges of translating the nuances of one culture to another.
Well, it all depends. It depends on how much you want or you can convey in the confines of the space that you have. For example, there of course are, for example, the religious, distinctive religious characteristics of Taiwan. Like in his comics, those are always in the background somehow. Not so much, in some more than in others. In one of his later works, there's even a character who's the miaogong, who's the caretaker of a temple, as the main character. So this is something that we in Germany don't have. We don't necessarily understand what's connected with it. That's something you can't convey in the confines of one's bubble that you might have as space in the comics. So it's a kind of a walk on a tightrope.
So Debkumar, you've worked on translations. In your experience, how important is the right kind of translation in allowing a comic to be widely consumed?
It is because they've largely Indianized the dialogues. In Bengal, snowing or Milu is called kuttush, which is a very lovable word for us. Tintin is called Tintin. And I'll just bring a small anecdote. I'll finish very quickly. I mean, if someone has read Flight 714 to Sydney, there in the original French creation, they landed at Jakarta and there is a exchange between Haddock and Professor Calculus. Professor Calculus is hard of hearing, so he's saying, why we are in Chandanagar. Chandanagar was a French territory in India then, when the thing was being created. When Michael Turner and Leslie Lonsdale Cooper translated that into English, they changed the place from Chandanagar to Rangoon, because Rangoon was a British territory. So when we get a translation in India, we do not retranslate. Had they translated from straight French, because Chandanagar is a place now in West Bengal, which is part of West Bengal, we would have enjoyed it much more than Rangoon. So that is the kind of things little things that translators do to make things, and it is translated by one of the most respected poets of Bengal into Bengali.
Let me bring Philippe in.
Yes, actually, one of the barriers that we face from French-speaking comics, whether it comes from Belgium or France, is actually that the language is hard to translate into Chinese, indeed. And in Taiwan, at least, as far as Taiwan is concerned, we don't have really that many Belgian comics translated into Chinese and published in Taiwan. The main reason being that the humor and the subtleties of the language in French are very dear to the storytelling, and that translation is not easy. We have seen more and more graphic novels that are dealing with very interesting, hot and serious topics such as climate change, international rights, and so on, published in Belgian French comics, but that are hard for the translators and mainly for the publishers in Taiwan. Comics publishers are very reticent to translate those because they don't believe it's that easy to convey those very important and subtle messages coming from the French language. And I think more popular are those graphic novels and comics that are less complex to translate, but more comics, more humorous, with maybe even comics that have no bubbles, no words, no dialogues. Sometimes those are a lot more appealing. And what's interesting also is that in Taiwan, Belgians sell a lot more children books, illustrated children's books, than comics in terms of publishing rights, because the graphics are the graphics and the less text storytelling from the children books are more appealing to the Taiwanese audience.
Now, if I can get you to flip that around and very quickly ask about Taiwan comics traveling out in the translations and the storylines, and does it even resonate with a global audience? Because sometimes the characters are very intrinsic to the culture here.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of what do we want to translate into an Indian language. There is a very famous book that traveled around the world in the past few years called The Son of Formosa, which talks about the actual contemporary history of Taiwan since the Japanese era. So it's a four-volume book. And it talks about it's a story of a comics publisher who was actually born in the Japanese era in Taiwan, and then went into the White Terror and the prisons and so on. And so the whole story actually translates into English, French, many different languages in the world, and it's one of the big hits in Taiwanese comics abroad. The story behind it is a lot more powerful than the subtleties of a language. So there, I think translation was not really a barrier. Language was not a barrier. What the story was actually the appealing part. So it really depends on what are we selling in the comics. So if we're selling jokes and slapsticks, in one page, A4 page short story, then French language comics are not very popular in Taiwan.
Right.
But if you're translating stories that are meaningful and they have impact, then such as Tintin, for instance, but also science fiction, or such as the one that I was mentioning, the Son of Formosa, is about the history of Taiwan, contemporary history of Taiwan. That's a lot more powerful, and that's a lot more universal and appealing to a global audience. So I think there's no really good or wrong answer to your question, because it really matters on the topics of the book itself and the appeal that it has to an international audience. Yeah.
Right, and Debkumar, I'm going to give you the last word here as we're running out of time. As someone who is shaping the minds of the future illustrated storytellers, can you tell us what the landscape is for India when it comes to comics in the future? What is the future for comic stories in India?
We are trying to build an ecosystem for the future. I mean, we feel that if we leave it for the future generation to take care of themselves, I think manga will gobble us up, because we are a very small community and largely surviving on translations and other things. While translations are good, it is very sad that despite having an 125 years tradition of comics making in India, hardly anything. I don't think Philippe will recollect any book from India that has been translated into French. But they are not, because either the appeal of those stories are very localized, or there are no takers for such things, or maybe sheer effort on the part of the publishers are not happening. So what I tell my students are mostly is tell your own stories, be fearless.
You've left us on a great note, telling future storytellers, illustrated storytellers, to be fearless. And with that, I want to thank you both. Thank you, Philippe Tzou, for joining us from Taipei, and Debkumar Mitra for joining us from Haryana State in India. Can Taiwanese manhwa outshine Japanese manga? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Click the video beside me for a discussion on how comics are more popular than ever. And if you don't want to miss more stories on tech and business from Taiwan, do subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell.